What's up, everyone, and welcome to the 28th episode of the Control Freak Podcast. I am your host, Alex Blackard, or @LessAlex on Twitter. Make sure to follow me there. This is the only Magic the Gathering podcast devoted to all things Control in Modern and Pioneer. And as always, we're sponsored by Solitary Pro and our Patreon supporters. If you dig the content and want to help out, make sure to check out the link in the description. Thank you to all the patrons who have currently signed up. Today, we have special guest and Solitary Pro teammate, the one, the only, the shadowy boy, Michael Rapp. Michael, how's it going?
Pretty good, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing well. It was a good day today. Tony, our teammate, actually just won a team tournament in St. Louis that I was TOing, so it was a good day.
Yeah, we definitely take those.
Oh yeah. But yeah, you are a PTQ winning, GP Toronto winning, and additionally you have 2 MC invites, Mythic Championship. You've played in 2 of them in London and Richmond. So yeah, it's good to have you on the show. Today,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
absolutely, yeah. But today's episode we'll be talking Pioneer bans, the ones that happened, I guess, when you're listening to this last week. We'll also be talking about the blue-white control versus Death Shadow in Modern, because if we have you on, we might as well talk about it. And then,
Yeah.
of course, we're going to be breaking down some of the leagues that happened over the week. We have one Pioneer League and one Modern League, so kind of light in terms of actual tournaments that were played, but we're definitely going to break into them and figure them out. But first things first, we want to get to know you and just kind of delve into your past history with Magic and kind of just introduce those folks that may not be familiar with you. So, you ready to rock and roll?
Absolutely.
Awesome. And as always, you can find this podcast on Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, as well as all the other podcast apps and YouTube. So let's get into this bad boy. I don't like to waste time. So digging in, Michael, at this point in your career, what would you say is your biggest Magic the Gathering accomplishment?
Um, I think I think a lot of people expect me to say winning GP Toronto, but
Yeah.
that is probably it in actuality. However, over the course of the last, what has it been now, 10 months, I've been really happy with progressing with a Magic player, or progressing as a Magic player after winning the GP, oddly enough.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. So you win the GP. You're sitting there. Like, take me through that. Like, actually winning. How many? It doesn't really matter how many players, but how many players do you remember? How many players there were?
I don't.
Yeah.
It was big enough that 13-2 was still the cut. I know we've seen
Okay.
some low attendance numbers
Yeah.
recently where some 12-3s have squeaked in at, a few of the recent GPs.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, what was going through your head at that point? Like, because
Um,
it's a grind, right? Like, no, I was just gonna
oh
say,
yeah.
like, Magic. Anyone listening to this or watching this podcast knows how much of a grind Magic can be. We invest so much time and effort into it, and I mean, finally, it paid off big time for you. Just take us through what was really going through your head at that point.
So it was interesting. Throughout the entire tournament, I just kept telling myself, hey, just keep playing more Magic. I've played thousands of matches of Magic before.
Yeah.
Time to sit down for another one, and I just did that over the course of the entire tournament. I think I tricked myself into being calm
That's a good skill to
throughout.
have. That's definitely a good skill to have as a
Yeah.
Magic player.
Throughout all of day 2, I was kind of just like riding the wave, right?
Right.
Because obviously being 9-0 at the end of day 1, I was like, all right, this is awesome. Like, this tournament is mine to lose.
Absolutely.
We went out, like, celebrated a little bit Saturday. Um,
Not too much.
yeah, had to be in playing shape for Sunday. And then Sunday I didn't lose until round 14.
Jeez,
Um,
that's insane.
yeah, so every round I had a buddy, his name is Griffin, that was running one of the vendor booths. And I would just go up to him, he'd have me come back every round to check in or whatever. And then I had a few more buddies, JT, Tom, and Jake, that were all there. And we had driven up together, actually, so they were a big help through the whole process. Both being there to just talk to when I needed to, like, clear my mind between
Yeah.
rounds or whatever. Being supportive, if I needed water or whatever, they were like, "All
Yeah.
right, I got you."
That's what I was gonna ask. How were they doing in the tournament to that point? Like, well,
Um,
obviously, I mean, I assume they didn't top 8 with it. Like, probably at that point they're playing. Go
yeah, I
get
think
me some water. Go get me a granola bar or whatever.
yeah, I think they were playing side events on the
Oh,
back
sure.
half of day two.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't a fantastic tournament for most of the room, but it was fine.
Right on.
I remember we after I locked top eight, I lost round 14. I drew round 15, and during round 15, a bunch of us just, like, walked to the store, talked about, like, how I should sideboard in the
Sure.
quarters, that stuff. Um, so it was pretty relaxing.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, it was weird. Like, even after I won, I was, like, pretty numb.
I
Um,
bet.
which is, like, a weird thing to think. I think most people expect you to be, like, really jazzed up, but after tricking myself into being calm all day,
You're
I was still just in that mind state.
yeah. I think that no, I mean I think that's definitely a skill that a lot of players could benefit from is just staying even keel, not getting too low, not tilting off if you misplay, and not getting super hyped up. You get that, oh, I top eighted, and like, because you need to be even keel to have a clear mindset to play. And it's awesome that you
Yeah.
had like a good support, with you, somebody that some people that would go talk sideboard strategy, people that would go grab you snacks if you need them. So definitely good stuff.
Yeah, they're all super cool guys, so I'm
And
happy to have them around.
absolutely, and that's one thing too. I think if you're going to be successful at the highest levels at GPs, at going to MCs, you need a good support. Like, you just have to, whether it's your
Oh yeah,
parents or it's your friends or maybe an LGS can like loan you cards or whatever the case may be. You need somebody.
yeah, yeah. I
So,
think that Magic is far more of a team sport than people give it credit for.
oh, absolutely.
Um, Granted that a lot of the tournaments are individual. That's not really what matters, right? Like, the
Yeah.
tournaments are only a fraction of the Magic that you play, and
Oh,
thankfully,
yeah.
I have a bunch of great friends. My LGS Next Gen Comics in Pelham, New Hampshire is pretty great. Um, all the guys there are awesome, and we're all about helping each other out. Growing as a community.
Absolutely. Would you consider that your best moment is winning the GP, or is there like another moment that maybe stuck out more?
In actual Magic,
Just
uh,
surrounding Magic. It didn't even have. I don't know. Maybe somebody had their deck stolen or something, and you maybe lent them a deck, and they want to, whatever. It doesn't have to be like
honestly,
actually playing, right?
yeah, I don't think that I've ever. Thankfully, I've never been in that kind of case,
Yeah, that's
where someone close to me had their deck stolen or anything. But the coolest Magic moment that I've had, um, was probably the first time that anyone ever reached out to me, and thanked me for the content that I was creating, and
yeah,
told me that it helped them or whatever. Because that's super cool.
absolutely.
Being in a position where I get to do that is super fulfilling.
No, yeah, I can feel that because anytime I get feedback on this or like on the YouTube stuff, it definitely feels great to the fact that people hit play every week is just like insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me if I was going to be here a year ago, I don't in good think I could have told you yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what is your favorite Magic the Gathering card of all time?
um, Contrary to popular belief, it's probably Thoughtseize.
Okay, not Death Shadow.
Yeah,
So
I think
Thoughtseize, yeah,
most
that's
people expect me to say that, but I've been a Thoughtseize mage far longer than I've been a Death Shadow mage.
that makes sense. I mean, Thoughtseize is a hell of a card. I mean, it's I like to always say it's one of the only cards that really invalidates card text, if that makes sense. Other
It
than
kind of
land,
does.
it doesn't care if you have hexproof, doesn't care if you're a creature or whatever, planeswalker. So I definitely, yeah,
Yeah, I think one of my stronger Magic skills is being able to understand the big picture of like how the direction of a game is or how the direction of a game is going to go.
yeah.
Um, and Thoughtseize really plays into that strength. So
Oh yeah, definitely.
uh,
If
nice
you're
pairing.
if you're good at thought seizing, it definitely helps you envision how you're going to win the game.
Yeah,
And then, what's your favorite format in Magic?
it's modern.
Modern. Okay. Yeah, I mean, right now, we've been on this podcast. We've been saying how the sky is falling, right? Because Blue White's just in a very poor spot, but for Shadow, it's in a really good spot. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's certainly not bad. I think that there are things that are like wavering, given
sure.
like the surrounding metagame becoming more and more hostile as more people pick up things like Eldrazi.
Yeah.
But
Traditionally, a
overall,
bad a
it's in
bad
a
matchup
pretty good
for
spot.
Shadow.
Yeah, that matchup's real bad.
Yeah, makes sense. Chalice on one probably real good.
It's not even Chalice, believe it or not. That matchup used to be fine until they printed Blast Zone.
Oh, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they get like three uncounterable copies of Engineered Explosives, and
Yeah,
becomes pretty hard to beat.
absolutely. I had this on here. I'm just gonna ask it, but I assume favorite deck.
Yeah, it's Death Shadow.
Yeah. And right now, what do you like if you were to go to a tournament? Which version? Because you say Death Shadow, and a lot of people I think assume you're talking about Grixis, but there's way more than just Grixis nowadays.
Yeah, I mean Grixis is still my favorite version, like to actually play.
Yeah.
What I think the best version is right now is tough. I actually tweeted a tweeted a screenshot of a Discord post that I made earlier today in my Discord. Um, and it's talking about how I think the sorry
You're good.
the I think the best version of the Shadow decks going forward are going to be the ones that get to minimize the effect of the green cards that are printed in 2019 in things like Oko and Veil of Summer. And I can't help but to think part of the push to play these cards in Death Shadow, even though Oko is like pretty off game plan, is because of some amount of inbreeding at the top of the metagame, right?
Yeah.
If you get to the conclusion that the Urza decks, Etron, and Shadow are like the top three decks,
Yeah. The top dogs.
you start to get to a spot where people are making card choices in order to beat those decks as opposed to the decks at large.
Yeah.
So because Oko is so good against Shadow and Etron, people are putting it in their Shadow decks despite it really not having relevant text on its +2 a lot of the time. I mean, there are corner cases where you want to
Gain
make
life.
food tokens for
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
but mostly you're playing it as things that invalidate. You're playing it as a way to invalidate your opponent's creatures, or have this weird every other turn Bitter Blossom-esque effect.
Yeah. Do you think Oko is good in Death Shadow right now, or just in general?
I think it answers a lot of problems that Shadow traditionally has problems with. So, for example, like a lot of Shadow decks struggle to deal with things like Thought-Knot's here in Reality Smasher, and Oko is very good against those cards. In addition to that, it is very good at dealing with cards like Ensnaring Bridge, which
Yeah.
it is often hard to have main deck answers for in a deck like Shadow.
Absolutely.
So it does do things. But it is a 3-mana Planeswalker, which is, on the more expensive side of spells.
Yeah.
But that's kind of it. It's like a weird, elaborate quasi-removal spell stapled to a weird Bitter Blossom.
Right on. I mean, yeah, that card's great. We've talked about that a lot on this podcast, how that card's just taking over almost every format. But so yeah, what are your plans moving into 2020? Like, what is your overarching goal for 2020?
So from a Magic playing side, I'm gonna try to make it to a bunch more SCG Opens than I did this year. I'm looking at about roughly half of them for Season 1.
Nice.
Obviously, GPs that are on off weekends or close or formats that I like will still be things that I'm interested in. Other than that, from a content production side, I'm going to continue writing for Card Kingdom. I'm hoping to expand my streaming schedule and beef up my streaming setup.
Awesome.
So get more into that. I keep telling myself that I'm going to edit and upload my stream VODs for YouTube, and maybe I'll actually get around to doing that in 2020.
It's a lot, man. Editing is a lot, and putting it takes time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you're already putting in the 5 to 8 hours actually streaming or whatever. So
Yep.
it ends up, you end up putting 12 hours into one YouTube video basically.
Yeah, which is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely insane. So just pretty much hitting up all the GPs and SCGs you possibly can, and then as well as just making more and more content.
Yeah, big Magic year next year, hopefully.
Do you have any goals in terms of successes? Thing want to take down an MC or top 16 in MC or anything like that, or?
I mean, I think every competitive player wants to win an MC, right?
I mean, I guess that was phrased incorrectly, but is that a realistic goal in your mind for 2020?
I think just trying to make it back to the MC is step one.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I day two'd my first one in Richmond, which was cool. My first one in London, which was cool.
Yeah.
I fell short in Richmond. Things didn't really go my way. So I'd like to get back to. I think I may have missed my opportunity to queue for Phoenix, but I'm not exactly sure when the qualifying season ends.
Yeah, it's kind of wishy-washy. They've been laying a lot of stuff out on us.
If I can queue for 1 or 2 or however many more PTs next year, that would be super cool. Realistically, I don't think that I will be at enough opens in order to qualify for the Players' Championship, but if that happens, that is also cool.
Yeah, if you just spike 3 of them and top 8 a bunch, or win one.
Yeah, it takes a lot to queue for the PC without being at all of them.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's definitely a commitment.
But yeah, I mean, that is kind of where I want to be, right? I just want to go to more things, play my best, and let the results follow.
Absolutely, that's what you gotta. I think sometimes players kind of get wrapped up in the results. I gotta maybe your goal at first is to top 8 IQ or something, and then maybe it's like, okay, now I got to win one, and then like if you fall short after you find that like initial taste of success, it can really drag players into a bad spot and really mess with their heads.
Oh, dude, I couldn't win a match to save my life for like 6 months after I won Toronto. It was wild.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's a rabbit hole too, right? Because like you get 9th or something at an IQ, and I did this a couple of months ago where I back-to-back IQs, I got 9th place. It felt terrible. And yeah, it was not great. But something that definitely avoid is just not getting too down on yourself. So, all right. And so what is your biggest tip for aspiring Shadow players? Because it's not an easy deck to play.
It's not. And honestly, this is not Shadow exclusive. This is more of a Magic tip, I think.
Sure. We take those too.
Yeah. It is consume all of the content you possibly can. Trying to figure out Magic by yourself is kind of a fool's errand.
Yeah.
It circles back to about how Magic is a team sport. Content producers are there to help you.
Right.
So base your work off of the work they've already done. If you can watch and read and listen to the work that they've already put into a deck and absorb that information, it makes it so you don't have to figure all that out yourself as well.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds simple, but like I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah. It's funny. There was a Twitter poll. I forget who posted it, but I said the same thing. They were like, what is your... If you could go back to when you started playing Magic and tell yourself something, what would it be?
Sure.
And that was my answer.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time doing things that I shouldn't have done or shouldn't have had to do.
Right.
If I just read or listened or watched the people who had already done those things. Obviously, It's good to figure some things out by yourself, but you can shortcut a lot.
Yeah, and some things you have to learn on your own, right? Like, but, I mean, the resources out there, I feel like Magic's at the point, I will never say there's too much content. I hear that a lot. Like, there's too much. There's too many content creators. Now, I know I'm a little biased because I am a content creator, but I really don't think there could ever be too much, because if you were to go on YouTube right now and want to see, say, Death Shadow versus Blue-White Control, there might be maybe 2 videos that are relevant right now, like in terms of the current cards that are in the format, might be 2 videos on YouTube, right? Maybe a little bit more, but like my point is there's not really that much in terms of like trying to find out this matchup versus that matchup. It doesn't have to be blue-white, and it doesn't have to be Shadow, but like you get my point. Like
specialized content is still a niche market. I agree that there is a large, like the content creator market is growing rapidly, and obviously the rate at which it's growing is not super sustainable. Or that growth rate isn't sustainable.
Sure. Yeah.
But even if I were to give you my opinions on, Shadow versus Blue-White or whatever.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that later, but yeah, you can continue your point.
And you asked other Shadow players the same questions, you would probably get somewhat different answers, right?
And that's
because
too.
People think about things and approach things in a different way. There's obviously like a generally correct way to approach things.
Yeah.
But some people make small sideboarding decisions or small mulligan decisions, things like that differently.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. And that goes back to kind of, you have to experience things for yourself. Like take everyone's ideas and then from those ideas create your own, right? Like,
yeah, I think the the backup to my point earlier was listen and talk to the people, and most importantly, play Magic with the people around you that you think are better than you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That, I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, because if you're constantly playing even or down in terms of like skill, you're never going to improve, right? Like, that's why if
Yeah.
you can get to like local IQs or local PTQs, go to all of them. If that's what you're trying to do is just improve, go to all of the events you can where you know there are going to be good players there.
Oh, 100%.
Don't even worry about the results at first, because those will come if you put in the time.
Yeah, I've been, especially this year, I've been really high on the mantra of results don't matter. What matters is playing your best, and once you are playing your best,
Yeah,
the results will follow.
absolutely. And then the last question I have before we actually get into talking about metagames and things like that, or actually before, I'm sorry, the last thing I have before we get into talking about the bannings is, what do you do when you're not playing Magic? Because you have to play like a lot of Magic.
I actually play less Magic on a weekly basis than I probably should, to be honest. But I'm mostly just an all-around gamer, right?
Sure.
Me and a few buddies have been on like a WoW Classic kick
Oh yeah,
lately.
I saw you on Discord playing some
Yeah.
WoW Classic the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so often just AFK with that game open that it's almost always
It's just always
what
gonna
shows up
say
on
that.
Discord.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we've been on that kick lately. I just got back from a buddy's board game night earlier. Outside of gaming, I have a group of friends that I go to a bunch of different breweries with.
Okay.
I like trying a bunch of different beer. Pretty into that.
Nice. Yeah. I'm in St. Louis, and there's a lot of like breweries in St. Louis. It's almost like how many card shops there are. There's a bunch of card shops in St. Louis, and there's a bunch
Yeah.
of breweries and like stuff like that. So you might actually like it in St. Louis if that's it, because there's a lot of places to play Magic and there's a lot of places to drink.
Yeah, I mean that's what more could you want?
What more could you ask for? Okay, so yeah, that's cool. Drinking and WoW, basically.
Yeah.
Right on. So let's get into these bans. Now, I predict that there won't be anything banned when everyone's listening to this. Could be wrong, but I don't know. I think they need to see what happened if that worked, right? What are your predictions for the bannings tomorrow, or today, rather, if you're listening?
I don't think we're likely to see any bans. That being said, there are cards in the format that I would prefer not in the format, that I think will likely get banned eventually, which are primarily Oko and 3-mana Teferi.
Yeah,
Um,
I could see both of those.
as they just create a lot of non-interesting gameplay patterns.
Yeah.
Oko obviously invalidating every creature and artifact in the format is not great. And Teferi, from a game enjoyment standpoint,
Yeah.
I'm generally fine with prison decks, but I want those prison decks to have deck building choices.
Right.
So like a good example is like the mono red Stompy deck in Legacy, right? You're like a Blood Moon Chalice deck.
Right.
But you have deck building decisions that go around that, right? Like you can't play a ton of non-basics because of Blood Moon, fine. They don't play any 1-mana spells because of Chalice, fine. Teferi kind of just says, I get to play on the stack and you don't at all.
Right.
So you can't stop me from interacting with you, and you can't interact with me.
Yep. And if you've ever been a part of a game where both players have Teferi, it's miserable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I played a random modern 1K a few months ago, where I ended up playing blue-white control mostly because I forgot the deck I was going to play at my house, and I just had blue-white in my backpack. And I played. I had a game against some guy who was playing like blue-black Narset Days Undoing stuff.
Oh my god.
And it was awful. It was the worst.
Sounds terrible.
Because we just both had Teferis in play, and no one could do anything.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, I obviously, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners, play the hell out of that card. But I acknowledge it is no fun to be under one of those bad boys. Like, it is just no fun.
Yeah. And I think those asymmetrical hate pieces are really... They lead to a lot of non-interesting game states.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like in the mirror match for blue-white, it's a race to Teferi, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, if you can resolve one of those early game, like, if they just go for it, you counter theirs, and then you land theirs, you land yours... like, you're so far ahead at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And even like the other asymmetrical hate pieces, like, not a big fan of Narset. I'm not a big fan of Karn the Great Creator.
Basically all of War of Spark. All the relevant cards from War of the Spark.
Yeah. I think War of the Spark added a lot of uninteresting cards to the game in general.
Yeah, I think that most of them would be fine if it wasn't for their static, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it'd be perfectly okay.
Watching people, myself included, play during the beginnings of that format was hilarious.
Oh my god.
People are just getting, GRVs left and right.
It was like something to the effect of, and I remember this because I was doing the podcast at the time, and I remember hearing the stat of something like, at your usual day one of an SCG, there's like 300 judge calls. The weekend of War of the Spark releasing, there was like 800 judge calls or something like nonsensical like that. That's insane.
Oh, yeah. The match I referenced earlier with the blue-black Days Undoing guy.
Yeah.
That guy tried to play instant speed interaction into my Teferi like 3 times in the same match.
Oof.
And it was brutal. And I'm not going to fault him. Like, I drew a card into Narset in the same match.
I mean, I still do it, right? Like, it's very easy to forget.
Yeah, it's part of our brain that has been trained for the last, decade or whatever to be like, oh, planeswalkers don't matter on your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
And now suddenly they matter a lot because they changed the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes only on your opponent or only on your turn.
Yeah. They're definitely an issue. And then, so let's talk about the cards that were banned. On Monday, Smuggler's Copter, Once Upon a Time, Field of Dead. What are your thoughts and any hot takes on those bans?
Field definitely needed to go.
Yeah.
In a format that doesn't have cards like Wasteland, that card is extraordinarily powerful. Even in a format that does have actual Wasteland.
Yeah.
Even in Modern where the power level is higher across the mid-range decks, I think that card is still good. Like, you see it popping up in like the Titan decks of all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
And I think it is a good card in those decks, but I don't think it's too powerful because Modern as a whole has a higher power level than Pioneer. But in Pioneer, that card was oppressive because there weren't any good ways to deal with that card if it was on the battlefield. Some people will counter that with, well, people could play Field of Ruin if they wanted to. In Pioneer, the mana bases are bad.
Yeah.
So including Field of Ruin in your deck has a large cost.
Oh, big time. Especially in like a blue-white control where you're probably playing 1 to 2 of the fetch land of the Fabled Passage. And then like that's a real cost. So, yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't put it into like, if you want to play like the bug control deck or whatever,
Not
you
a
can't put
chance.
Field of Ruin in that deck.
Not a
It's not even
chance.
close.
Yeah, no way. And then Once Upon a Time, I think that card was just getting to the point where every single green creature deck was just ram jamming 4 of them in hopes to up their percentages of finding like a 1-drop mana dork and making the percentages so high that it really did have to go.
Oh, I've been playing the green blue Stompy deck, like the Galta deck.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That deck was good. I haven't played against it since the ban, but
Yeah, I haven't played Pioneer at all this week.
um,
But the consistency in which I had a turn 1 mana dork was dumbfounding.
egregious. Yeah.
Between 8 elves, 2 goose, and 4 Once Upon a Time, you just have it every game.
Yeah.
And it leads to a lot of
That's wild.
games where it's like, oh, you have turn 1 dork on the play, you played a turn 2 Steelleaf Champion or whatever, like the game is over.
Absolutely.
But on the contrary, if you're like, oh, I have turn 1 dork on the draw and it gets killed, you just like are a mile behind.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair. Do you agree with Field and Once Upon a Time for the most part?
Yeah, I think Field definitely had to go. I honestly think Once Upon a Time is a card that I like in theory, but in practice it is awful.
Yeah.
I think that when that card was printed, I went, oh, this is great because every Magic deck wants this.
Yeah.
Like, every Magic deck wants lands, they want creatures. To some degree. Like,
Right.
I think it helped a lot of decks that were struggling, whether it's like Infect or Devoted Druid or sorry, even the Primeval Titan decks are interested in playing that card now.
Yeah, which is scary.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those decks that were threat light that had consistency issues, I could see Boggles playing it.
Oh God.
Like, all those decks got a cool new tool that like kind of helped fix their consistency issues. Because nobody wants to mulligan, and all that card does is increase your range of keepable hands.
Oh yeah, you just almost snap keep every single hand with that card in it. Unless the hand's just like a bunch of 6-drops and it, right? But
yeah, and I've got to the point where I'm playing some in like various shadow builds, because they are those decks that have highly impactful threats, but not many of them.
yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, I agree with those two. What about Smuggler's Copter?
So this kind of jumped out to me as like the Rampaging Ferocidon ban.
Yeah.
Where they were afraid if they got rid of, Field of the Dead, that the mid-range decks would kind of come back into the metagame, but the mono black deck is also just good against those decks.
Yeah, so that's the thing is like this set of bannings to me kind of feels like they just kind of hit the best decks. They're like, all right, we're going to take one piece from all 3 of the best decks and kind of see where things shake out.
Yeah, so I'm not positive they needed to ban Copter now.
Yeah, it seems a little bit premature to me, but I understand. Because, I mean, Mono Black was all over. It was like something like 30% of all of the PTQ decks, top 8. So if like there was a stat that like combined all of the PTQs, it was like 30 to 32, something like that percent.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago on the Pioneer and Modern metagame.
Yeah.
With the results from the Invitational weekend.
Okay. Yeah.
And Mono Black Aggro across the Moto Pioneer events, the Envy, and I think that was it. I don't think there might have been a paper Pioneer PTQ in there somewhere as well.
Yeah.
Mono Black Aggro had the most top 8s by almost double the second place deck.
Yeah, and I mean, his name's escaping me, but the guy that won, Barone.
Brown.
Yeah, I mean, he was just slaughtering people on camera. The finals of the Invitational, he just 3-0'd him like real quick, like wasn't even a thing. Like came here, got his money, went home.
Yeah, and that's the thing is the mono black aggro deck it is hard to poke a weakness in that deck, because it has disruption. It can be very aggressive, and it's very resilient. Like a lot of its creatures come back from the graveyard.
Yeah,
And Smuggler's Copter kind of just tied all those pieces together. So I understand why they banned it. I think it was a little premature,
yeah,
but I
I
think it
agree.
is incredibly likely at some point in the in the history of the format that that card will end up getting banned at some point.
Sure. And that was the thing is like some people were telling me, oh, there's no way that card's gonna get banned. It's not that like great or whatever. I'm like, there's already it has a history of getting banned, so I understand it. Though I do think I agree with you. It was a little bit premature. They should, in my opinion, they should have seen how the Once Upon a Time and Field of the Dead kind of shook out, and then because the not only the mono black deck got hit with that, but the blue white flash deck, which was I was like on board to play. And then,
That deck looked very good.
But now it's just like I don't even really want to try it. Like it's probably just not even good enough, right? Like
Yeah, I've seen people moving towards like as far as that deck goes, I've seen people moving toward the mono white splashing Ojutai and Reflector Mage version.
yeah, which that's fine, but I don't know that flash style, that style playing at instant speed. That's that's what I dig.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of maneuverability throughout the course of the game.
Absolutely. So yeah, we got some leagues that happened. There was only, like I said at the beginning of the cast, it was a light week for the leagues. Let's take a look at this Pioneer League. A lot of the same stuff that we saw last week, but let's get into it. There was this really sick kind of dredge deck, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Creeping Chills, Haunted Deads, Narcomiga, Prize Amalgam, things like this, using Satyr Wayfinders to kind of fill your graveyard, along with Stitcher Suppliers and all that stuff with Grizzly Salvages. I mean, this deck, if you play Dredgen Modern, this is definitely probably a deck for you, because it is Dredge, quote unquote.
Yeah. I have a friend that plays exclusively Dredge in every format that they can. And they've been working on trying to find a good Dredge deck for Pioneer. And, so I funnel them decks that I see like this a lot.
Yeah.
The level up in this deck that I haven't seen before is Gurmag Angler.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense though, right? Because you're going to have your graveyard's going to be fat. So
yeah.
It's just interesting that it hasn't seen play until now.
Realistically, a lot of these decks, like if you look at the creatures in this deck, they're not that good.
Yeah.
Like you have a 1/1, a 3/3, another 1/1, another 1/1. Like
Lovestruck Beast would be great in this deck.
Yeah. Gurmag Angler gives you a real way to actually like apply pressure and close games.
Yeah. And for 1 mana potentially, like sign me up. If I was into those decks, sign me up for Gurmag, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, is these decks often have no problem filling their graveyard.
Yeah.
But have a lot of problem finding relevant things to do with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this deck looks it looks good. I mean, the whole Stitcher's Supplier in a Narcomoeba Prize Amalgam is just a strong thing to do, I think. And of course they've got Creeping Chills. I mean, this deck looks solid. I'm not sure it's true viability. Again, you kind of got to take 5-0 lists with a grain of salt, because I don't want to say anything can 5-0, but since they combined the competitive and the casual leagues, it is what it is. If you follow the 5-0s, you kind of get the gist. But moving on, we have a really sweet Boros Aggro deck, utilizing.
This deck is fast.
It is very fast. Dauntless Bodyguards, Rabble Masters, Hanwar Garrison, and Battlements, the land, Hanwar Battlements. So we're going to be flipping into, I don't even know what the card is. It's a 7/4 beat stick, though. I know that.
Yeah, it makes 3/3s from an attack.
It's insane. Kari Zev, Legion Loyalist, Rimrock Knight, which I didn't even know was a thing. It's a adventure card that target creature gets +2/0 until end of turn at instant speed for 1 mana, and then it is a 2 mana 3/1 that can't block. Makes sense though. I mean, that card is very aggressive. And then heroic reinforcements, just a sorcery that makes 2 deuters, and until the end of the turn, your creatures you get +1/+1 in haste.
Yeah, most of the time that this card gets cast, I imagine is going to kill someone.
Lights out, yeah. And then we're playing 4 of it too, so.
Oh yeah, we are leaning into that one.
Yeah. And then Boros Charms, Lightning Strike, Wild Slash, the usual suspects in the instance slots. Yeah, this looks like it could definitely be an issue for control. That's for sure. This thing is fast.
Yeah, this deck is going to make you Wrath early and often.
Yeah, that's why like 4 Wraths, strict blue-white. That's where you want to be, I think, at Pioneer. If you're playing control, blue-white, because aggro is going to start to become a thing. I've been playing against the mono-white aggro deck a lot. It's quick.
Yeah, like the always watching deck.
Yeah, Gideon is a problem. Gideon Blackblade, you can't needle it. It just always is going to crash in for 4.
Oh yeah, and you can't Wrath it. That card is just it's good against the things that you are trying to do.
Absolutely. And then we have green-black, so just the rock. This is pretty stock, except we're playing some Delirium shenanigans with Emrakul. Very reminiscent of the Eldritch Moon standard green-black deck, Tylos Trackers, and it's splashing white for Siege Rhinos. Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, 2 best cards in the format. Like, this card seems very good. Or this deck, rather, seems very good.
Yeah, I think this deck is
strong mid-range deck.
Yeah, doing a lot of things that are powerful and things that people like, which is cool.
Yeah,
I think that. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I can. Yeah, go for it.
There are a couple directions you can go with these green blacklists, and we've started to see people at the beginning of the format explore decks like this, and then they move towards like the Sultai builds to try to play Dig Through Time. But it's sweet that as the format is slowing down, people are moving back towards like these true mid-range, like Delirium, Siege Rhino builds.
Yeah, and these are the kind of decks that, blue-white, and I'm going to keep obviously bringing it back because this is the Control Freak.
Yeah.
These are the decks that, we can definitely beat these, but Thoughtseize is definitely a problem. Emrakul, if they cast Emrakul, the game almost ends on the spot. Big problem for us. Because, like, if you get your turn taken, they're just going to cast all your spells and counter and kill and Detention Sphere and do all of the things that you don't want, that you want to be doing to them, to yourself. So,
yeah. I think that there are not often many turns taken after an Emrakul of Promised End gets put on the stack.
Oh, no. Yeah, I've had one cast against me in Modern, and it was just like, all right, we're done here. Next game. Moving down the line, we've got just a blue-green aggro deck playing 4 Okos, a bunch of elves. We're playing, 10 elves with Gilded Goose, Elvish Mystic, and Llanowar Elves.
Yeah, this is the deck that I was talking about earlier that I've been having a lot of fun with.
Oh my gosh, this is not it for me. I would never cast any of these cards ever.
I I mean, to be honest, I'm much closer to like the Siege Rhino deck that we just talked about, or like one of the Sultai mid-range decks. But for a long time, those decks weren't good because of Field of the Dead, so I had to figure, something else out. And I think a lot of the cards in this deck are very powerful given the context of the format.
I mean, and it's playing Wicked Wolf, Steel Leaf, Scavenging Ooze, Ronus the Indomitable. That card's like shot up in price. It's like doubled in price.
Yeah, that card's powerful.
Questing Beast, Lovestruck Beast, and Stubborn Denial. Like, this deck's it. This deck is, I think, the real deal. Any deck playing 4 Okos alongside of Questing Beasts and a bunch of Elves, I think, is just going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, turn 2 Oko in every format that you can play it in is incredibly powerful, and this deck does an excellent job at presenting a turn 2 Oko.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm moving down the line because there was a control deck that I wanted to talk about, and of course, now I'm not finding it when I need to. Here's one that is pretty interesting. It's blue-black control. Narset times 4. Narset part of Rails times 4. 3 Hostage Takers, Scarab God times 2. Torrential Gearhulk, Vantage Gargoyle.
Is this an Into the Story deck?
Yeah. Let's see. Into the Story. No.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's playing. They're playing Downfalls, Fatal Pushes, Drown in the Lock, Dig Through Times, Languish, Duress, Despise, Azcanta. Yeah, this is an interesting deck.
I think a lot of the time that you see Vantress Gargoyle, you'll often see it accompanied by something like Into the Story, but that card can certainly be clunky at times.
Oh yeah, because if you don't have it, then it's just like a bad card, like objectively.
Yeah, I love seeing decks play Scarab God. I picked some up, the day the format was announced because I identified it as something that was likely to be one of the mid-range breakers, if you will.
Yeah. Here is a really sweet take on Nexus of Fate. This is a Bant Nexus of Fate. It kind of leans more into the Planeswalkers with Teferi, 2 Teferi Heroes and 1 Teferi Time Raveler, along with Gearhulks and Supreme Verdicts. Yeah, I mean, definitely this is kind of, to me, of course it's playing a Tamiyo. You pretty much should just
you
play that card. But yeah, this is more of a control deck playing Nexus rather than a Nexus deck trying to fog every turn and, do the shenanigans. This deck's actually pretty sweet. I would play this deck.
It is. So when you see these kind of decks, or when I see these kind of decks, I suppose.
Sure.
I tend to think that they are much closer to wanting to play something like what's that white card? Approach of the Second Sun.
Yeah.
Than they are to something like a Planeswalker build or a Nexus build, rather. But it is possible that Nexus is just enough stronger of a card than something like Approach that it is worth changing your game plan for.
Yeah, I mean, Approach is good, but Nexus is, I mean, why is that card an instant? Come on.
I think you can ask why about basically any section of that card and have it be a valid question.
Right? Like, why is it 7 mana? It should have just been 5. Like, let's kill our opponents real quick. Moving on, there's a deck actually that I was curious of because of the bannings. All these lists are post-banning, by the way. Just
okay, cool.
Yeah, so this is a deck. So this is the Twiddlestorm deck that me and Adam talked about last week on the podcast, and we're both big Twiddlestorm fans, especially in Modern, because that deck's actually like pretty insane in Modern. But I was real skeptical. I played it a bit with so this is playing Shimmer Possibility, which is replacing Once Upon a Time. Me and Adam decided to play the one that digs 3 deep and then the cards go to the graveyard. Shimmer of Possibility is a 2-mana sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards, and it puts them...
Strategic Planning?
Strategic Planning, yeah. That was the card that we were playing. This card replaces the onces with Shimmer Possibility, so Shimmer of Possibility. 2 mana, look at the top 4 cards, so it digs 1 deeper, but it doesn't put them in the graveyard. And that is important because of Dig Through Time.
Yep.
But yeah, this deck is sick. It plays a Boreal Grazers, Fae of Wishes, Vizier. You basically want to get your Lotus Fields and start twiddling them to get enough mana to cast Omniscience, and then you Fae of Wishes, and then you go and draw your entire deck, and then cast Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. So yeah, that's the Pioneer 5-0s. There is one other Pioneer deck that we're going to talk about real quick. This is our teammate Tony Johnson. He just won an IQ in St. Louis, or I guess it's not St. Louis, it's Columbia, whatever. It's Missouri. This deck, if you will want to play a blue-white control deck and you're wondering where to start, I highly suggest, and you know, you have the list as well. This deck is tight. He sent it in the group chat, and I was like, yeah, this thing's good. This is a very tight. All these cards like make sense for the most part. There's a few of them that he said he didn't really like. He said he didn't really like the Syncopates, and I actually changed them. There were 2 Syncopates. There were 2
I'm not really seeing any.
There were 2 Syncopates and 1 Censor. He said to switch it, so I just did it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, this is tight. That entire list, it plays Brazen Borrower, and it plays an Elspeth Suns Champion and Censors, Blessed Alliance. But if you want to see the entire deck list, of course, all that will be in the show notes. This deck is definitely a good starting point. What's your take on this deck?
I mean, if you're looking to play blue-white in this format, I think it is tough to get better, or tough to start at a better spot. As someone that plays a lot of mid-range decks, this deck looks like an actual nightmare.
Yeah.
It plays Brazen Borrower, which I think is ridiculously good in these control style decks.
Oh, dude, and I've played it maybe 5 matches or whatever, right? So not too much with this specific build, but Brazen Borrower is just so good against the stuff that blue-white struggles against, like being able to bounce Planeswalkers, being able to bounce a problematic card, and just time walking them at the very worst. So good.
Yeah, so what it does intrinsically, I think, is better than what it actually does. I think that card puts a squeeze on your opponent from an axis they can't really fight on, right? So traditionally, if your opponent thinks you have something like a counterspell, an absorb, or something of that nature, the way to beat that is not cast your important spell until you have a way to deal with that counterspell.
Right.
So now, with the existence of Brazen Borrower, your opponent has to think about not casting their spell. But if they don't, they just get like mega punished by Brazen Borrower.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, if I don't cast my spell, then my opponent gets to, play a 3/1 with Flash. Especially when the spell that you want to cast is one they just bounced.
Yeah.
So you're in like this super, super bad squeeze. And even if you don't want to play the 3/1, this deck has like Sphinx's Revelation and Dig Through Time and a ton of other things that it can do at instant speed. Should you decide that the 3/1 is really the route that you want to take that turn?
Yeah. I mean, Brazen Borrow is like $40 now or something in paper.
Yeah, it's insane.
It was like $16 like what, a month ago or whatever. So
yeah, I picked some up on my flight back from Richmond, and I looked at them and I was like, wow, this card is $16. That is criminally underpriced.
Right.
And sure enough, a month later or whatever, it's like $40.
Yeah, it's the real deal, and I think it lets control decks have something that we really don't have a lot of the time, which is like you said, it punishes them either way. Like,
Yeah,
damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenario.
It fills a very Vendilion Click-esque role.
Yeah, no, definitely. Though I think the cards are very different, but very, very obviously their stats are identical.
Yeah, I mean, it's Vendilion Click is your proactive version, and Brazen Borrower is your reactive version.
And obviously it has insane synergy with Teferi Time Raveler. If you are ever in a position where you're bouncing your Brazen Borrower, congrats, because you've won the game.
I was playing Standard in Richmond, and I played against a blue-white control deck where they were time wiping with Brazen Borrower.
That is hot.
That
Wait,
one was,
in Pioneer?
That one was hard to beat. No, in Standard.
Oh, in Standard. Okay, yeah. That's a spice.
You could convince me that is something that you might want to do in Pioneer. Supreme Verdict is obviously just better,
right,
in just about every spot, but it was more speaking to the effect of how brutal Brazen Borrower is if you ever get to bounce it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's focus now on the 5-0 list for Modern. We kind of went down the rabbit hole with Pioneer, but
yeah.
So let's talk a couple of these decks. So the first one I see is Curryvore. He's a pretty well-known blue-white player in Modern,
Sure.
and he's doing it. He's playing blue-white Miracles. So 4 Jason Mind Sculptors. That's 4 in Modern is like unheard of. So off the rip, this list has my attention. 1 Teferi, 4 Snapcaster Mages, 4 Terminus, 1 Timely Reinforcement, Archmage's Charm, which is a card that doesn't often see play in these decks. Deprive, 4 Force and Negations. I don't hate that. I definitely don't hate that. And then we have like your split 1/1 Logic Not Leak, Ops. He's playing a Cast Out and 2 Search for Azcanta. So he's opting to play Search for Azcanta over something like Narset, which in this deck I definitely dig, because you can like look at the card, all right, Miracle, or that's not what I need next. So what are your takes off the rip, just off the top?
I think Archmage's Charm is an interesting card. I had written an article about blue-white control with the release of Modern Horizons.
Okay.
And I was pretty sure that Archmage's Charm was going to be a big deal. And it was at first, and then it died off for a long time. So it's cool to see Curryvore picking it up, for this build of the deck. It is certainly better than it is normally when Death Shadow is a popular deck, because that card is insane against Death Shadow.
Yeah.
Just being able to steal Death Shadow as either a terminate or even getting to actually control the Death Shadow is a powerful thing to be able to do when it is stapled to a counterspell and a divination.
Yeah, I mean, that's insane against Death Shadow. But yeah, this, of course, all these decks will be linked in the description. The next deck is good old Urza. Wurza, if you want to call it that. This deck's a staple.
Never getting away from this one.
Yeah, this one plays sort of the meat combo, so, I mean, this is just a staple. Then we have Storm, Gift Storm, so that deck's coming back. I mean, Drake Sasser won in Open with that deck not too long ago. I think
Storm is one of the decks that can punish decks like Urza and Eldrazi Charm, and it is currently somewhat underplayed. I think, like you said, people are starting to pick it up again, but I don't think it's getting played nearly as much as it should be.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And then we have I guess you could call this blue-red spells, blue-red thing in the ice. It's kind of like a blue-red Phoenix deck without Phoenix. It's playing Brazen Borrowers, thing in the ice, Snapcasters, 1 Jace the Mind Sculptor, 1 Royal Scions, some Serum Visions, Archmage's Charm again. So very interesting that people are... I mean, it makes sense. If Death Shadow's kind of one of the pillars at this point, Archmage's Charm looks great.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is, kind of just your Blue Moon variant.
Yeah.
Granted, right now I might be leaning more on Blood Moon than less, given how popular things like Tron and E-Tron.
Yeah, just one Blood Moon in this one.
Blood Moon is pretty bad against Urza, but it's also just like good a lot of the time against Shadow. It's one of those cards that you really have to gauge, right? It's like insane against Amulet, and it's like even good against the Titan Shift decks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, then we have Death Shadow. So this looks like Jund, 4-color Death Shadow with Stubborn Denial is mainly the only blue card.
Yeah, I've been working on some versions like this, but they tend to be more blue than red, or more. They tend to be more Bug with red than Jund with blue.
Sure.
But this is certainly one of the reasonable directions that you could take the deck.
Yeah, they're playing a couple of Disdainful Strokes in the sideboard, but other than that, it's just Jund. And then, of course, we have Eldrazi Tron, we have regular Tron, Burn, Hardened Scales. This is all just normal stuff.
This is an interesting deck. This Eldritch Evolution deck playing 4 Yawgmoth and a Liliana Heretical Healer.
Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, so let's take a look. We got Birds of Paradise, Blood Artist, Geralf's Messenger. Yeah, Heretic, Liliana, Noble Hierarch, Scavenging Ooze, Strangleroot, guys, Wall Roots, Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. Yeah, this is spicy.
Cards in this deck. And it's cool to see Yawgmoth get, some play, because that's another card that I looked at when Modern Horizons came out, and I was like, wow, this card's really cool, but I don't know if it has an actual home.
Yeah, it's kind of always been overshadowed by Urza, just because of how obviously powerful Urza was from preview season.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, it's really cool seeing Yawgmoth getting some play.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like the aristocrat-y style decks. So when Yawgmoth got spoiled, I was like, wow, this card is sweet. Like I hope I get a chance to play with this card at some point.
Yeah, it definitely it does a lot. Then we have just more Urza decks, more Thopter decks.
There's this Bant control deck that Bean Eater played.
I'm not even seeing that.
It's like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Oko, Big Teferi, Small Teferi, Snapcaster, Icewing Kotal.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That oh no, this is. But yeah, that deck is actually what a lot of blue-white players are playing, because again, in Modern, blue-white's just it's rough. It's been a very rough time for about a month or so, maybe even a little bit more. But pretty much since Oko came out.
Yeah, that card's problematic for you guys, I'm sure.
Yeah. And then so
problematic for me too, to be honest.
But you get to utilize it. I'm a blue-white purist. I refuse to play Bant.
Yeah, I'll tell you that.
For better or worse.
For Shadow Pilots, I don't ever want to sit across from this deck.
And then here's just Grixis Death Shadow playing 1 Royal Signs. Is that pretty typical at this point?
Yeah. I think when that card first got spoiled or shortly after, it was a card that I was interested in because it kind of helps you out when you're flooding, which is certainly a thing that Shadow decks can have happen because the cantrips in Modern are pretty bad.
Yeah.
It also gives you some quasi-evasion without being as all-in as TBR.
Yeah.
So one of the important things that card does is against like humans, for example, once you would start to turn the corner and start attacking with your Death Shadows and Grimag Anglers, they had a lot of random creatures lying around, Noble Hierarch, Sail Freebooter, um, stuff like that they could just chump with for a long time. And the Royal Silence says you can't chump anymore. Like you have to block this with real creatures, or you're going to take damage.
Yeah, you're just gonna be dead in like 2 turns.
So that is certainly one of the spots that it fixes some of your problems. It also is just a real threat against the control decks, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Improving the quality of the Death Shadow player's hand over the course of the game by looting every turn is powerful. But also, that ultimate is huge.
What is its ultimate? I don't have it pulled up right now.
It is draw 4 cards, deal damage to any target equal to the number of cards in your hand.
Oh yeah, that's insane. Killing a
So it's often
planeswalker
like
or killing us is like
it's
not-
going to be
not
like
great.
a deal 7 or deal 6 or something strapped to a draw 4.
Yeah, you get to nuke a planeswalker basically, which is very good.
Yeah, and it puts a lot of pressure on you guys to be able to answer that card, and it ults relatively quickly because Royal Sounds has a ton of starting loyalty.
Yeah, jeez, yeah, both it and Oko are just like, come on, like, how are we supposed to kill this? You literally can't kill Oko with damage. It's just impossible.
Yeah, I joke around all the time that Oko is just immune to combat damage.
Yeah, right. Pro creature damage, right? Yeah, so that's actually a really good That's actually a really good segue into. So we had a question from, I forget where it was. I do apologize if you asked a question and you're listening to this. I apologize specifically to you. But what is? Can you give a brief breakdown of the blue-white versus Death Shadow in Modern? Now, they weren't specific on what variant of Death Shadow, but I mean we can kind of talk from both sides, the blue-white side and the Death Shadow side. So if you want to kind of kick that off.
Yeah, so from the Death Shadow side, the matchup against the blue-white decks are tough.
Yeah. Yeah, no. That was my first thought, was like, don't get stubborn denied in a key point in the game, and this matchup is honestly pretty. It's our best matchup, like, generally speaking. Now, obviously, if you get stubborn denied or they have a very extremely fast start and you kept a horrendous opening hand, you can die. But
yeah, the keys to winning from the Shadow side is realizing that it's about picking your spots.
Yeah.
Clearing a path with your discard spell, trying to counter certain things at certain choke points.
Yeah.
But realistically, you don't have a ton of time. You have to get a couple of good attack steps in, and that's all you can really do. Obviously, if you have cards like Snapcaster Mage to apply instant speed threat and gather some 2-for-1s, you'll be in a better spot than if you're playing a version without it.
Yeah.
But it's weird because you have to kind of try to grind with the blue-white deck, but you can't. Because they're better at grinding than you are. It's a really strange position to have to be in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very hard from the Death Shadow side, I think, and it almost doesn't matter what variant. I think just blanket term, Shadow is in a rough spot because all it takes really is 2 resolve Path to Exiles, and almost you can't win.
Yeah, I mean, Snap Path is a big deal. Teferi Time Raveler is huge.
Yeah,
beating that card is so difficult.
Yeah. If that card resolves and like you fire off one path, the game's good. You're good. You're gonna win if you're on blue white seat.
Yeah, it obviously the versions that play Tarmogoyf over Gurmag Angler have a little bit easier of a time beating Teferi, because you could just cast your threat again on the following turn, and you don't have to worry about having enough cards in your graveyard to delve.
Yeah.
But I never want to be across the seat or across the table from that card.
Yeah, and I mean things like Celestial Purge are just insane against it because all your relevant cards are black.
Yeah, for sure. Again, another point towards Tarmogoyf instead of Gurmag Angler in that matchup.
Yeah. But yeah, I just think overall, and if you're playing engineered explosives in your blue white deck, it's just extremely good. I know that's been picking up in popularity in Modern.
Yeah, for sure. That one's also tough.
Yeah, I think just and even Mystical Dispute, I don't hate it. It's fine. Not necessarily what you want to be doing, but like if you had nothing else to bring in, sure.
Yeah, it's like okay against the Grixis versions. I think it's pretty pretty not fantastic against
Yeah.
like the more Jundi versions.
Yeah, and then like what, Baneslayer Angel and stuff, like
Yeah, so Baneslayer Angel and Celestial Colonnade add an interesting wrinkle to the Death Shadows sideboarding plans, because I really don't want any removal spells in my deck
yeah.
against blue white.
And that's
But
having that
the existence.
yeah, having that potential to be able to have like a quote unquote transformational sideboard is like, I was actually joking with Tony today at the tournament, like you as the control player, your sideboard plan needs to be the opposite of what most control decks are doing. So if they're going into Baneslayer and Lyra, you should probably be going into stuff like just harder control.
Yeah, I mean, so I cut basically all of my removal spells in that matchup, but I will leave in something like a Dismember.
Yeah.
Just because I want to have something
Just
that
in
can
case.
kill
Yeah.
a Lyra or a Celestial Colonnade or a random Vendilion Click or Brazen Borrower or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's like whenever you keep in a verdict, like a singleton verdict, just in case that corner scenario pops up where they bring in, like in the mirror, if they bring in a bunch of creatures.
Yeah, I mean, Verdict is certainly adept at handling like Monastery Mentor
Yeah,
out of the mirror sideboard or whatever.
absolutely, and it is very easy for them to just go Mentor, opt, and then all of a sudden they have like 5 creatures and you're going to die.
Yeah, and they scale pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I mean, with this matchup, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not going to tell you anything probably that you haven't heard unless you haven't ever played the matchup before.
Yeah, I mean, from the Shadow side, like I said, I think it's about picking your spots, and unfortunately, that's hard to explain on something like a podcast, right?
And it's always it's contextual too. Like it's one of those things that you have to have done to really understand.
It's not even, I mean, in addition to something that you have to do to understand, it's a thing that you have to have all the information to accurately explain.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, from the blue-white side, just keep removal heavy hands. Obviously game 1, you got to kind of just roll with the punches and keep a solid 6 if need be, even if you don't have a path. But keep opt hands, keep hands that draw spells.
It's funny. I've lost to a lot of blue-white players keeping one-landers more than you would think, just because I will like Thoughtseize them on one or whatever, and I'll see like land, path, Snapcaster, Verdict, Celestial Purge or something, and I'm like, okay,
Can't
I don't
win.
really know what I'm supposed to take.
Yeah, keeping Thoughtseize proof hands, i.e. 1 or 2 lands, is very good because you obviously you want to hit your land drops. You cannot win the game if you don't have at least like 5 lands for blue white, but
Yeah,
you're going to draw them or you're going to lose either way.
yeah. So the way that I often beat blue white is that they stumble.
Yeah,
So one landers are not obviously ubiquitously good,
right.
but one landers with like multiple past exiles and an opt or whatever um, are certainly hands that you should be interested in. Um, but stumbling can occur on the other end as well, where I'll play a blue on it and they'll keep like 5 lands opt path or whatever, and I'm like, all right, take your path, force you to find something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Yeah, I mean this has been a marathon. I think this might go
It's been a
down.
long one.
I think maybe Francesco might have had a longer episode, but that man is very, very detailed when he speaks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that about does it. If you want to do housekeeping, tell people where they can find you, where they can find your articles, where they can find you on Twitter and all that stuff. Go ahead, and then we can close this bad boy up.
Yeah. So the easiest way to find me is on Twitter, at Rapacious1. I think that is currently under my head.
Yeah.
And I assume that all of this stuff is going to be in the show description somewhere.
Absolutely.
So if you find me on Twitter, my pinned tweet has a link to all of my other social medias. So that's going to be the easiest way. On Facebook, I'm just Michael Rapp. On Discord, you can find me at, what is my Discord number? MRAP, hashtag 8516.
Yeah.
I run a Discord. The link to that is in my pinned tweet as well.
And you can send me that, and we'll get that in the description if that's gravy with you.
Yeah.
So
you can catch all my written articles on blog.cardkingdom.com. I usually publish on Fridays. What else? I think that's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, well, awesome. Thanks again for coming on. You're excellent. You are you're not a shadowy boy. You are the shadowy boy. You've won a GP. You've been to MCs. Like, definitely one of the people that have been on the podcast with the most accolades. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, you have that. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and everybody listening.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime, man. You want to come on next week? We could do that again. But yeah, everybody, as always, thanks for watching or listening. Make sure to head on over, if you are listening to this, head on over right now to my YouTube channel. Just search Les Alex. Of course, all the information will be in the show notes, and vice versa. And of course, as always, this is sponsored by Solitary Pro and the patrons. The Patreon is patreon.com/LesAlex. If you dig the content and find value in it, head on over there and consider becoming a patron. I definitely appreciate it. I do have some perks, and we're real close to the next goal. So just check that out and help grow this podcast and my content. Additionally, I do stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/LesAlex, and I'm on Twitter at the same, LesAlex. But yeah, everybody, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to me and Rapp's conversation. It's been fun as always. And next week, same time, same place, I will be back with another guest and another some more blue-white control content for you. As always, thanks for listening. Have a great day, and remember, be kind to one another, Magic players. Have a good night.
Take it easy, everyone.